The Korean War, a conflict often overshadowed in history by World War II and Vietnam, was a pivotal moment in the 20th century. It was a war that stemmed from the complex aftermath of World War II, a time when the world was grappling with the rising tensions of the Cold War. The Korean Peninsula, with its rich history and culture, became a tragic battleground for these global power struggles. The division of Korea was at the heart of this conflict. After World War II, Korea, previously under Japanese rule, was divided along the 38th parallel. This division was initially meant to be temporary, a stopgap measure until a more permanent solution could be found. However, the rising tensions of the Cold War quickly turned this temporary division into a permanent one. The Soviet Union backed a communist government in the north, led by Kim Il-sung, while the United States supported a pro-Western government in the south, led by Syngman Rhee. The Korean people, who had endured decades of Japanese occupation, now found themselves caught in the crossfire of a new and even more dangerous conflict. Families were divided, and the cultural fabric of the nation was torn apart. The division of Korea solidified into two separate states with opposing ideologies. The North, under Kim Il-sung, embraced communism and aligned itself with the Soviet Union and China. The South, under Syngman Rhee, adopted a pro-Western stance and received support from the United States and its allies. This ideological divide was not just a political or military issue. It was a deeply personal one for the Korean people. The Korean War, therefore, was not merely a border dispute but a proxy war between the two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, each vying for dominance in the early years of the Cold War. The conflict saw brutal fighting, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. The war also saw significant involvement from other nations including China, which sent hundreds of thousands of troops to support the North. The United Nations, led by the United States, came to the aid of South Korea, marking one of the first major military engagements of the Cold War era. The war raged on for 3 years, devastating the Korean peninsula and leaving a lasting impact on its people. In the end, the Korean War did not result in a clear victory for either side. The armistice signed in 1953 established the Korean Demilitarized Zone, DMZ, a heavily fortified border that still exists today, symbolizing the ongoing division of the peninsula. The legacy of the Korean War continues to shape the geopolitics of the region and the world. It serves as a stark reminder of the human cost of ideological conflict and the enduring impact of the Cold War. As we reflect on this chapter of history, we are reminded of the resilience of the Korean people and the importance of striving for peace in a divided world. The seeds of the Korean War were sown in the ashes of World War II. The devastation left behind by the global conflict was immense, with cities reduced to rubble and nations struggling to rebuild. The global conflict had left Europe devastated and exhausted, its infrastructure in ruins and its people weary from years of relentless warfare. The continent faced a monumental task of reconstruction, but amidst this destruction, two nations found themselves in positions of unprecedented power. The United States and the Soviet Union, having emerged victorious, were now emboldened and ready to assert their dominance on the world stage. Both emerged from the war as superpowers, each possessing formidable military might and a desire to spread their respective ideologies. The United States, with its democratic values and capitalist economy, and the Soviet Union, with its communist doctrine, were on a collision course. The United States, advocating for democracy and capitalism, sought to promote its way of life as the path to freedom and prosperity. It used propaganda to spread its message far and wide. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union, championing communism, aimed to inspire a global revolution. It too employed propaganda, painting communism as the solution to the world's ills. These two superpowers found themselves locked in an ideological struggle that came to be known as the Cold War. This was a war of ideas, fought not with traditional armies but with words, images, and covert operations. This war, fought not on traditional battlefields but through propaganda, espionage, and proxy conflicts, influenced global politics for decades. The Korean Peninsula, in particular, felt the weight of this shadow. The Korean Peninsula, strategically located and politically divided, became a focal point of Cold War tensions. The conflict there was a direct manifestation of the larger ideological battle between the superpowers. The division of Korea at the 38th parallel was a direct result of this rivalry. This arbitrary line drawn by foreign powers split families and communities, setting the stage for future conflict. Both superpowers sought to expand their spheres of influence, using Korea as a pawn in their global chess game. The United States backed the South, while the Soviet Union supported the North. Korea, weakened and divided, became a battleground for these competing ideologies. The Korean War was not just a local conflict, but a significant episode in the broader Cold War narrative, illustrating the far-reaching impact of the superpowers' rivalry. On June 25, 1950, the fragile peace on the Korean peninsula was shattered. The North Korean army, armed with Soviet tanks and weaponry, launched a surprise attack across the 38th parallel, invading South Korea. The South Korean army, ill-prepared for such an assault, was quickly overwhelmed. The invasion shocked the world and marked the beginning of the Korean War. The United States, fearing the spread of communism in Asia, quickly decided to intervene. President Harry Truman viewed the invasion as a direct challenge to the United States and its allies and pledged to support South Korea. The United Nations, newly formed in the aftermath of World War II, also condemned the invasion and called for North Korea's immediate withdrawal. The stage was set for a conflict that would draw in nations from around the globe. The United States, with the backing of the United Nations, spearheaded a multinational force to repel the North Korean invasion. Soldiers from numerous countries, including Great Britain, Canada, Australia, and Turkey, joined the fight alongside American and South Korean troops. The United Nations forces, under the command of General Douglas MacArthur, initially faced a difficult fight. The North Korean army, well-equipped and highly motivated, had made significant advances into South Korea, pushing the defenders back to the Pusan perimeter, a small area in the southeastern corner of the peninsula. However, a daring amphibious landing at Inchon, a strategic port city on the west coast of Korea, turned the tide of the war. The Inchon landing, masterminded by General MacArthur, caught the North Koreans by surprise and succeeded in cutting their supply lines. Section 5. The Chinese enter the fray. The Inchon landing marked a turning point in the war, but it also triggered a dramatic escalation. As the United Nations forces advanced northward, approaching the Yalu River, the border between North Korea and China, the Chinese government issued a stark warning. China, under the leadership of Mao Zedong, viewed the approaching UN forces as a threat to its security, and decided to intervene. In late October 1950, hundreds of thousands of Chinese troops crossed the Yalu River and entered the war on the side of North Korea. The Chinese intervention caught the UN forces off guard, and they were forced to retreat from their positions in the north. The war entered a new phase, one marked by brutal fighting, harsh winter conditions, and a growing sense of stalemate. Section 6. Stalemate and Trench Warfare. With the entry of China, the Korean War settled into a bloody stalemate. The front lines stabilized near the 38th parallel, and the conflict took on a brutal character reminiscent of World War I. Both sides dug elaborate trench systems, and the fighting devolved into a war of attrition. Casualties mounted on both sides, with neither able to achieve a decisive victory. The war dragged on for 2 more years, marked by periods of intense fighting and uneasy lulls. The Korean War was also a conflict of immense human suffering. Millions of civilians were caught in the crossfire, their homes destroyed, their lives disrupted. The war left an indelible mark on the Korean peninsula, both physically and psychologically. Section 7. The War for the Skies. While the ground war raged on in a brutal stalemate, a different kind of battle unfolded in the skies above Korea. The Korean War marked the first time in history that jet-powered aircraft clashed in combat. American F-86 Sabre jets faced off against Soviet-made MiG-15s flown by North Korean and Chinese pilots. The skies over Korea became a testing ground for these new technologies, and the air war had a significant impact on the course of the conflict. The air war also highlighted the global nature of the Cold War. While the Soviet Union never officially entered the war, it supplied North Korea and China with weapons and aircraft, and Soviet pilots secretly flew missions for the communist forces. Section 8. Armistice and Division. By 1953, after 3 years of devastating war, both sides were exhausted. Negotiations for an armistice began in earnest, and on July 27, 1953, an armistice agreement was signed at Panmunjom. The agreement ended the fighting and established a demilitarized zone, or DMZ, along the 38th parallel, separating North and South Korea. However, the armistice did not bring a formal end to the war. No peace treaty was ever signed, and the two Koreas remained technically at war. The hope for a unified Korea, shared by many at the war's outset, remained unfulfilled. Section 9. A legacy of conflict and hope. The Korean War, though often called the Forgotten War, left a lasting impact on Korea and the world. This conflict, which began in 1950 and lasted until 1953, saw immense suffering and bravery on both sides. It was a war that drew in nations from around the globe, each with their own stakes and interests. The war resulted in millions of casualties, both military and civilian. Families were torn apart, cities were reduced to rubble, and the scars of the conflict are still visible today. The human cost was staggering, with countless lives lost and many more forever changed. It solidified the division of Korea, creating two separate states with vastly different political and economic systems. The Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ, stands as a stark reminder of this division, a heavily fortified border that separates North and South Korea to this day. The war also intensified the Cold War rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. It was a battleground for these superpowers, each supporting opposing sides, and it highlighted the global stakes of their ideological conflict. It demonstrated the devastating potential of proxy wars and the willingness of both superpowers to intervene in conflicts far from their shores. The Korean War was a clear example of how local conflicts could escalate into major international crises. Despite the enduring division and the lingering tensions, the Korean War also offers a glimmer of hope. Over the years, there have been numerous efforts to bridge the gap between North and South Korea, with peace talks and family reunions providing moments of reconciliation. The resilience of the Korean people, their determination to rebuild their lives and their nation in the aftermath of such devastation, serves as a testament to the indomitable human spirit. From the ashes of war, South Korea has emerged as a vibrant and prosperous nation, while the hope for a unified Korea remains a dream for many.